Hello and welcome to the next installment of Kaiju Movie Review. In this episode I'll be reviewing an American film made during the late 50s at a time when monster movies were reaching the height of their popularity. I'm going to keep it short this week, so here's your review.
Alright, I'll be reviewing The Monster That Challenged the World, released in 1957. This movie was made during a great time in American cinema when monster movies were being pumped out by just about every movie studio. Most of the monster movies of those times had something to do with atomic energy of some sorts, and this film is no different. The monsters are pretty much giant snails, but please don't let that deter you. It's not as cheesy as you might think. The monster design is actually rather good. The team that created the monster seemed to put some time and effort into it. Although to most, it might not look that great, especially by today's standards, but it's as good or better than other monsters of the time. These creatures use their grabbing mandibles to hold on to prey and then jab their proboscis into them and suck out the water and blood. Surprisingly, radiation is not the sole reason for these creatures coming to be, but rather an earthquake under a lake opens an area where dormant eggs are laying. The water activated the eggs and the radiation just seemed to speed up the growing process. They also mention that the creatures would lay eggs, but it just kind of happens. They don't really go into too much detail about it. The monsters in the film aren't really given a name, but they aren't indestructible. They can be harmed like any other living creature. The threat these monsters present also isn't immediate. They aren't going to kill everybody in a matter of hours or days. It's more long-term, like a matter of years, which I thought was rather interesting. The male lead for the movie is Lieutenant John Twillinger, who works for Naval Intelligence, who was sent to investigate the disappearances. The other male lead is Dr. James Ross, who is played by Hans Conried, who provided the voices for Thorin in the 1977 animated Hobbit movie, and Captain Hook in the 1953 Disney classic Peter Pan. However, his character in this movie is not all that well developed, just the typical scientist, although he does do some decent acting. Lastly, the female lead in the film is Gail McKenzie, Lieutenant Twillinger's love interest and Dr. Ross's receptionist. The actors all seem to do a decent job in the film. There are some weak moments, but most of it is decent. I just wish there was more I could say about it. As for the plot, it isn't anything spectacular and it's loaded with cliches. While this sounds like a bad thing, it's handled well and is rather entertaining. It has your typical military type, brash main character, the generic scientist, and your usual attractive woman as a love interest. The movie starts off on a naval base built on a large inland salt lake located in California. The Navy has been conducting all sorts of experiments, such as testing parachutes and radioactivity. An earthquake occurs on the floor of the lake and opens up a crevice. After that, members of the military base randomly start vanishing along with residents of the area. Naval Intelligence sends Lieutenant Twillinger to investigate and thus sets up the rest of the film. This movie is built more like a horror movie than a monster carnage movie. The creatures in the film are somewhat bigger than a man, but not overly huge. There's a lot of moments of stealthy killing, mainly in the water, but there's at least one on land, which I thought was kind of odd since they're giant snails. This movie also includes another big cliche of the time, which was the senseless killing of teenagers and young adults that have no real importance to the plot. The special effects in this movie were decent when they were actually used. Aside from the monster and the occasional dead body, you don't really see them too often in this film. And because of that, I can't really say much more about it. They were just mediocre. This is a good example of how to make a decent monster movie. While it's not perfect, it's fun. The monster was pretty good. Not a guy in a poorly designed humanoid suit, just a large, well-done puppet. The story was nothing spectacular, but it was pretty engaging, having some decent dialogue and a good amount of action sprinkled throughout. I don't think everyone will like this film, but most should, especially sci-fi and monster movie fans. I also rather enjoyed the ending. It all came to a climax rather quickly with a lot of action. I don't want to give any of the films I reviewed a half rating, but I think I can make an exception for this one. So I'm giving this film a 3.5 out of 5. Hope you all enjoyed the review, and I'll be back in a few weeks with another review.